Okay, it is 7 p.m. Welcome everyone to our May FST5 webinar. We are so excited to have our guest here today. So I'll just go through a few things before I introduce our guest. Kobe is not going to be joining us today. My co-host is feeling a little under the weather, so we'll send Kobe well wishes. As everyone knows, fst5.org is our website. This is a program that is ran by Wayne State University and supported by our major unions, NPFFU, POAM, FOP, and supported by the governor's office and the state of Michigan. So we thank them so much for allowing us to have this platform and to present these education sessions to all of you. So again, check out the website, fst5.org, or call our call line at 1-833-34-STRONG. That's 1-833-347-8766. Okay. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And I'm sure some of you already know our guest, but you may not know his daughter. So let me introduce you guys to Sean and Ellen Abbey. They are father and daughter duo. Sean has had over 30 years in the service, right? In the fire service, over 30 years in the fire service, started out in Springfield Fire Department in Michigan, and is now a battalion chief at Kitwood Fire Department. And I will let Sean tell us a little bit more about his career, and then I will go ahead and introduce Ellen. Go ahead.
Good evening, Manisha. Thanks for having us on. Appreciate it. Hello, everybody. Like Manisha said, my name is Sean. I've been very passionate over having better mental health solutions in the first responder world for many years. We had a suicide, unfortunately, in my own department over 10 years ago that hit close to myself and our department. And I really realized that we need to do better by our people. So we looked for solutions. We didn't have a lot, and we kept trying to find different things. And we finally did find some different solutions and some better resources out there, which was very, very good for our people. And then not so long ago, I had another friend pass away by suicide, and it just kind of strengthened my resolve, further, we need to do more. For those of you who don't know, I served for 16 years as a vice president for the State Firefighters Union, and I was passionately involved with developing this program and getting the funding for this program for the Frontline Strong Together program for all of our first responders across the state. And I also sit on the Governor's Suicide Prevention Commission. And it's just something that I think there's a lot of solutions out there. And I think that we need more resources for all of our people, and need to make sure that we're connecting those people to the right resources in their time of need. So that's kind of a little bit about myself. And I'll turn it over to the star of the show, the smart one.
Yes, Ellen is the star of the show. Okay, thank you for that, Sean. And yes, Sean is one of the pioneers of the FST5 program. So this is a very special webinar to have him here with us. You've been with us from the start, right? Rocking with us from the start. So this has been great. We are so fortunate to have you. So Ellen Abbey, who's recently just got married, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes, she is the daughter of a first responder. So she was raised in a first responder home. She went to college at Grand Valley State University, graduated magna cum laude with a master's degree in social work. She is currently working as a licensed clinician at Encompass, right? Which also has the program Backing the Badge. So can you explain that program a little bit more? Because I think a lot of people know of Backing the Badge, but may not know too much about Encompass.
Sure. Yep, absolutely. Thank you. So like Maisha said, my name's Ellen. I'm a licensed master social worker. I've been working with Encompass for about 5 years. So the majority of my work is counseling with individuals and sometimes couples and families. Encompass is an employee assistance program. So we are a mental health service that partners with companies to provide mental health services to their employees and employees' family members. And a division of Encompass is called Backing the Badge. So that is a specific team of us that works with our first responder groups and departments. So we all either have some unique connections to the first responder world, whether that be through growing up in some sort of first responder family, being a former first responder. We also receive some unique training. We're all certified in CISM, so we often go on site and provide critical incident debriefs. Many of us assist in our local peer support. With the departments and counties that we work with, we'll assist them in developing or growing or strengthening their peer support programs. So that's primarily kind of Encompass and Backing the Badge. So oftentimes you kind of hear them interchanged. They are the same, just Backing the Badge is a unique entity of those of us that have some unique perspective and trainings, specifically to be culturally competent working with first responders and have the tool belt needed to meet the unique needs of first responders and their families.
Awesome. That's amazing. Thank you so much for explaining that. Because yes, I think I was calling Encompass Backing the Badge originally.
Sorry.
So that's really good that you were able to explain that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So today's topic is why we don't ask for help, the stigma with mental health within this first responders world. And this was a really important topic. We have a that spans our entire 5 disciplines. We have every level we've encountered first responders in the administration, first responders on the streets, their supports as well, identifying that it's been really hard for first responders to, 1, ask for help, period, for anything. And for 2, it's really, when things are really, really bad, feeling like they want to isolate, withdraw, and kind of having the space. And so this was a really important topic for us to bring in Sean and Abby Sean and Ellen, sorry about that, because the perspectives that you two can bring for us as the first responder and as the support system of a first responder, in addition as a clinician. So I'm super excited to have Ellen's perspective here. So Sean, I think we'll start with you.
Yeah, stigma is a big piece. Ellen and I teach a program called Growing Up in the Fire Service, and it's a Acute course that we teach around the state to fire departments mainly. And stigma is a big piece of that course, as far as understanding stigma and just describing it and really trying to understand and get rid of it the best we can. The big thing is I kind of want to start out with why is stigma so important and why do we need to address it and try to resolve it? And the main thing is this hinders those that need help from seeking out the resources they need. And it can really sabotage any program that you might have by blocking those in need from accessing that assistance. And that includes this program we have here with the state program. If there's a stigma associated to it or a stigma that you believe is associated to seeking help, you might not reach out to any program that you might have, including this one. According to the American Psychiatric Association, half of all mental health illness will not people with mental health illnesses do not seek help because of concerns over stigma or discrimination. That's half the people. That's a lot. So if you figure this out, also 1 out of every 5 people in the US is going to experience a mental health illness every year. So 20% of us are going to have some type of mental illness every year. That means 1 in 10 is not receiving the help they need. So if you break that down for our country, there's over 336 million people in the United States. So we expect over 67 million will experience some type of mental illness a year. That means over 33 million people are not receiving the help they need because of stigma and discrimination. That's kind of the main reason we're here. That's just, those numbers are way too high. And for something that there's not a lot of things that we can like point fingers at and say, hey, this is a solution. But with stigma, there's definitely some solutions that we can come up with and try to help make it better. And then think about those numbers in your own department. And what does that mean where you work? So like in my department, we have 50 people in suppression. So that means out of those people, we've got basically 10 a year are having some type of mental illness, and 5 of those are not getting help that they need. So think about what that means in your department, where you work, because if they can't access those resources because of that stigma issue, then we're kind of losing the battle before it even starts. And then we actually talk about the word stigma. I think that's important to talk about as well. They talk about in the dictionaries, it's a mark of disgrace associated with a particular circumstance, quality, or person. And I want to focus on the word disgrace, because I think, I mean, when you talk about stigma, I mean, that's kind of horrible. It's a disgrace for these type of things. And one thing stigma is associated with are things like murder and cheating, lying, stealing, all those type of things there's stigma associated with those. But there's also a stigma associated with mental health support, which is very sad. And this disgrace piece means a loss of reputation or respect as a result of a dishonorable action. So like literally like saying it's dishonorable to seek help. And that means lack of honor, integrity, disgraceful, shameful. So when you talk about the word stigma, the word itself is horrible. And I think we just need to kind of get past that when we put it towards something as helpful as seeking mental health support. And then there's really 4 different types. And again, a lot of that stigma is associated with just a lack of understanding what mental health is, or a fear of the unknown. And that's kind of some things that we can work through in our programs and with our peers and our leadership in our departments to help get past some of that. There's really 4 types we're going to talk about too, like public stigma. That's just a stigma associated with things like the fact that you might be concerned, where people might be concerned for people's well-being if they're seeking mental health support, that tie into it's a negative thing. Then there's a self-stigma where the actual person feels like that they're less than by seeking mental health support. And some of that's triggered by one of the other ones, which is institutional stigma. And that can be as easy as look at your own departments and look at your healthcare plans and look how many options there are for physical health and how many things that you receive for physical health. And then look at how few things there are to support your mental health. So there's institutional stigma where people might not get jobs or promotions, or they're fearful of getting fired because of mental health. And then there's even a stigma tied to the treatment. Like you might not want to seek treatment because of what you think that person's going to say to you, or what they're going to, you're afraid you might have to seek treatment. You might be worried that you might have to be tested or anything like that. So there's all these types of stigma that are associated with mental health that kind of tie it all in. And I'll get to Ellen here in a second. But again, a lot of this stuff even gets tied back to the media. It's very good and bad. We get so much of our information through social media, television, movies. And how many times have you watched a movie or seen a TV show or a program or even a newscast where they just shed a very horrible light into mental health? There's good and bad examples of that. Really good one right now, if you haven't had a chance to see the John Mulaney Netflix special. He's a comedian that battled addiction for a long time. And he basically does his special and he basically focuses on how he almost died and his journey, and he makes light of it through a comedy sketch, but he really hits it head on, which is good. And then there's bad stuff like the Joker, the Joaquin Phoenix version in 2019, where they kind of show the bad light of mental illness and how he turns violent with that. And so people look at these things and you see people in white padded cells and white padded rooms and all this type of stuff in all these movies, and things like Hannibal Lecter and all those type of things. And people associate that with mental health when that is a very extreme piece of mental health, but it can also be, drinking too much or doing, just not living the best life you can, not being happy, depressed, anxiety, all those type of things that we can treat very easily. So I think in the media, a lot of times it's focused on, the far extremes of mental health. And you see these things, a lot of things are blamed on mental health that might not actually be kind of where we're at. But why do you think it's an issue? I'll let everybody kind of type in here. Why is stigma such an issue with mental health? You can just type in, Manisha, if you want help with that. And then Ellen's going to kind of moderate this next section as far as why you think stigma is such an issue with mental health.
And one thing, just as you all are typing in your answers here, one thing I just want to hit on, and I think that you hit that there well with the role that the media plays. We can focus on one very extreme end of a continuum, when in reality, we all have mental health, right? So those examples at the beginning of 1 in 5, statistically 1 in 5 Americans will battle mental illness, that is a diagnosed illness, like a physical illness. There's a set of criteria to that. But all of us have mental health all year round, just like our physical health, just like our diet. We all have a diet. That doesn't mean you're on some sort of, Weight Watchers diet. Diet is what we eat. Mental health is the same. We all have mental health. And so when we talk about these extreme ends of the continuum, we're most likely looking more at a mental illness, which again is more of that 1 in 5, and doesn't mean one of the most extreme kind of ones that can be portrayed in the media or show up in violence or, fill in the blank on a very extreme outward display of an illness. So just keeping that in mind, when we're using the phrase mental health, we all have mental health all year round. It's just whether we're paying attention to it or not.
So I think we got some answers. Let's get some responses
Great.
here. So first one says, biggest thing I hear is the job. Their mental health takes second seat to their needs to provide for their families. Yeah.
And I think what they're saying
Yeah.
there too, Ellen, is like, and you might be able to hit on this, like taking overtime versus spending time. I mean, we talk about in our class how valuable time is. I think that's kind of what they're alluding to.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Trying to find that balance between maybe a day off would be beneficial, but I can't turn that overtime down because you have to provide financially for the family. We've got a kid heading off to college, want to be able to take that family vacation, got to make this month's bills, whatever it is, wherever we find ourselves, that can be a really tricky piece. And what can make it even more complicated is when maybe our definition of what brings about wellness, whether that's for ourselves or financially, differs than our partners or our family's definition. That can cause a lot of tension. That was a frequent disagreement in my home growing up. Right? Okay, just because overtime's available doesn't mean you got to take it every time. This time we're going to protect for family. And so one thing that my family started to do a little bit later on was we would just, my parents would decide, like, this is a day where if you get an overtime call, that's optional. The answer is no. Other days this week, sure, we can talk about it and you can take it. But this particular day is going to be a family day, and we're just going to decide even before that phone rings that the answer is no, and that helped alleviate some tension. But absolutely, it's very difficult, and especially in the heat of the moment, flares some tempers maybe, or some frustration.
Yeah, absolutely. Next one says, much of mental health is still perceived as a choice or weakness, and this misbelief has lived on.
Absolutely. Judy, thank you for that response. Absolutely. I think that's something that we hear often in our courses when we ask individuals of reasons that individuals might not, or concerns that they have if somebody knew that they reached out for support. We often hear the word weak. I'll be seen as weak. Or, kidding on that choice piece, I'll be seen as not able to do the job. Okay, I'm doing something that makes me inadequate to perform, and that's within my control. So absolutely think that is a very strong one. I think in particular amongst first responders, because you all are the ones that others call for help, right? Rarely the ones making that call. And so it can be uncomfortable to be on the reverse of that. That's not where you're comfortable.
We'll be getting to the next, the CT post a little later in the program. Manisha,
Okay.
We got some areas where we're talking about first responders, but I would like to ask one more thing for them to respond on. So how has the stigma of mental health changed in your opinion, both personally to you and for your employer? Do you think that it's gotten better, it's gotten worse, the attitude towards seeking mental health? What are your opinions out there, and what do you think you're seeing in the field, in your departments, as far as that stigma piece?
Right.
And I would say one thing to start off with, the fact that we're all here tonight on a Wednesday night, and we've got this resource available to all of us. I think that's showing us that there's definitely areas where we're making vast improvements, because we were not doing this 20 years ago.
Absolutely. Okay, so on the Q&A section, we have the response to why stigma. It says, we're not supposed to struggle with mental health, especially those of us who are first responders. Makes us look weak.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, Ellen, you touched on that a bit. The perception of looking at, as if you're not supposed to be the one that's struggling, you're supposed to help the ones before. And then the second response to that was, recently heard another podcast suggest we stop referring to it as mental health, just refer to it as health. There should not be a difference between physical health and mental health when it comes to importance. I think that's spot on.
Yeah, absolutely. Love that. Yep. We don't have to equate them, right? They are equally important, and they go hand in hand, right? I would say that our mental, physical, emotional, social, financial, spiritual, it's all part of our well-being, right? However we categorize each of those areas, whatever those areas look like, they look so different for all of us, but they all contribute to our wellness and our health, and they bounce off one another. So if we're not well in one area, it's going to impact others.
Well, we got a whole piece on symbiotic relationships later in the program that we'll get to, hopefully. But one thing I thought Ashley posted, I do agree that there's a huge difference between downstate and up north, where you're at. But I would say this, I think that using stuff like this can help close the gap. Ellen, do you want to talk a little bit about that? I mean, how many people you see telephonically and through stuff, resources like this, so you are able to reach out in different ways?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, I do agree. There's definitely a difference in resources based on your location, which is unfortunate. And I also want to acknowledge that's frustrating, especially if you really value an in-person interaction. On the other side of that, though, one positive thing to come out of COVID, there's way better access to virtual support than there was 3, 4, 5 years ago. And it's covered a lot more than it was previously. If it was an option, insurance or state programs wouldn't recognize it often as care or help in the coverage. So one positive is the use of, whether it's over the phone or video conferencing, support is much more widely used. And I would say it's different than face-to-face, but in my experience, especially a video option, especially if you're comfortable with the person, it can provide some pretty good support. I think it's more about who are you meeting with. You feel like that's a good connection. And then we're a little bit more apt to trust the virtual process, I think.
And I think that's a great option too, talking about limited resources in certain areas. So if you're limited, let's say, to one, let's say, counselor in your area, and you're not comfortable with that counselor, like Ellen said, I think the fit's more important than where you're at. So maybe you could reach out across the state to different places and have Zoom options and find that really good fit, and not have, and like where maybe 10 years ago you didn't have this, so you were forced to basically see that particular counselor that you might not have had a fit with, where today you don't have to. There's other options out there, and you can kind of go around and do that. Real quick, I kind of want to get to our next kind of pieces, because I want to basically spend a half hour talking about stigma and what it is and why we don't call help, and then the next half hour what we can do about it. So real quick, why, if for the general public, we'll kind of talk about this a little bit, and then I'd like you guys to respond. Why don't public servants, why don't people, first responders, or anybody as part of the Frontline Strong Together 5 program, why don't any of us seek help? So Ellen and I are going to talk about why people don't seek help in general, and then I would like you guys to all kind of answer in the question box or the chat, that why don't first responders particularly seek help. So Ellen, why don't people seek help with stigma?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I think you all hit some of the big hitters here with sometimes it's struggle with access of I don't know what's accessible or a lack of knowledge or what is available maybe isn't well published and readily available, especially if we're in a point where we're actively struggling. That's not a time for us to do a bunch of detective work and problem solving. That's not where our brain is functioning. Not out of anything that we are necessarily doing wrong. That's just, our brain is not firing with our problem solving part of our brain in those moments. And so that can make it even more frustrating or discouraging. Like, why even try? I don't even have the energy to add one more thing onto my plate, let alone scroll through a benefits handbook and try to get into the weeds to find what I might have access to, or sit on the line for 30 minutes with my health insurance to find out they cover 5% of a copay, right? So sometimes it's the access or the finances, not knowing the resource, particularly ahead of time as well. Sometimes it's word of mouth. Maybe somebody had a negative experience and people think, oh, well, I don't want to try now, which that always, obviously I'm biased, but that always hurts my heart a bit, which I think is important. If you do have a negative experience, one, that's really unfortunate, but also try someone else. We all can't be everybody's cup of tea, just like it's pretty normal for most of us to shop around for a primary physician. I'm not going to connect with everybody, and that's okay, because that process isn't about me. It's about that person finding the right connection for themselves to be able to go where they need to and find the support that they need. And so keeping that in mind as well, if you go for a session or two and it just doesn't feel like the right fit, that can be discouraging. Try to reach out again, try to see it like a more of a doctor's office where you'd probably reach out again to try to find the right fit or get that second opinion.
And the perception also, I mean, when you talk about the things like stigma wise, as far as you're weak or, can they do the job or any of those type of things. Ellen and I, like we talked about, teach a class and we hit on stigma, and it's literally almost 100% of the people say something like they're worried about being weak. They're worried about negative connotations about them losing their reputation, those type of things. But to a T, when we ask people about what they feel when one of their friends is going to get mental health support, to a T, they're very supportive. They're good for them. It's great. They're getting support. I'm happy for them. I hope they get the help they need. What can I do to help? So in our mind, we've got this stigma where, hey, seeking help is weak and we can't do things. And and mental health it's not for me. I'm too tough to have mental health issues or whatever. But really it comes down to a lot of that's kind of put in your own mind, and a lot of the outside world is happy. And here's the thing too, if I'm having an alcohol issue, an addiction issue, if I'm having mood issues, if I'm having depression, anxiety, guess who knows about it? Everybody. Your family, your work family, they all know about it already. So if you're going to get help, and they're happy for you generally. That's what we found in these classes, where they want you to get that help. They want you to live your best life. So that's really, so we'll kind of transition into first responders, and first responders, I'll kind of hit on that a little bit. And I see we've got a couple comments in here, but obviously, you hit it on the head, Ellen, earlier, where we are the problem solvers. We're the people you call to give, we give help. We don't receive help. We're the ones you call to take care of problems, not create problems. I think there's some of that. And is that what you've seen in your work?
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very difficult for people to be on the other end, or will say things like, I really didn't know what to expect when I called. I wasn't sure what this was going to look like. I saw somebody gave kind of top 3 answers that they've heard. One of them being they don't want administration to look down on them or consider them, not promotable. Confidentiality is huge amongst first responders. I would say for confidentiality is huge amongst everybody, but I think in particular with first responders, because that fear of job security, of am I going to be seen as not fit for duty, and that fear that comes in there. And so I think one of the biggest things that I hit the hardest right off the bat when I meet with a first responder is the confidentiality aspect, that the only people that will know is if you let them know, if you communicate that you have sought help, and making sure that again, making sure that we have an understanding of the services, that nobody knows you go to this appointment, just like nobody knows that you went to see your doctor around something that's going on, because there can be a lack of understanding of how that works, which is completely fair. We don't know what we don't know, or until we experience it. And even then, sometimes there's still a mistrust and questions. We have had worked with some individuals that didn't trust previous services because it was where they would take the people that they arrested who had mental health concerns, and they're like, I'm not going there, right? I'm not crazy, right? That's where I take those people, right? And so again, we have kind of this misperception of what mental health is, or what those services can look like, out of that's where I take people. I can't go there, right? Or I don't want to go somewhere within the community that I serve, because what if I run into somebody? Could be a possible plug for virtual support, right? That's one plus, or driving to a neighboring county or city to help ease some of that comfort of, is admin or my coworker is going to know. So if there's worries about coworkers seeing you differently or seeing you as unreliable. But going back to Dad, what you said about when we flip the script of what do people say if a friend or a peer is getting support and it being overwhelmingly positive of good for them, I'm glad that they've sought help. Man, if I'm counting on you to have my back, I want to know that you're well. And I think that starts with taking care of yourself and reaching out if and when you need it, right? And how do we flip that script to say, no, that's how we become reliable, and that's how we stay reliable, and we sustain the weight of the job that you all do, because it's a heavy weight to carry. And that's how you stay sharp and well for the long haul.
Yeah, and it goes back, Stephen, I appreciate your comments. But it goes back to what I said a little bit ago. If your partner or one of a crew at one of the firehouses, if someone's got an alcohol problem, most of the people in the house or the partners know that. So if that person is going to be seen, is going to seek out some support for addiction, I'm happy, because when it does hit the fan, they're going to be in a better place than they are today. So I think that's good. And then the last piece you said about not knowing where the resources are, that just saddens me to no end, and that we just need to do a better job. And that's one of the reasons we're here today. And we'll talk about that, Stephen, as we go further into the program, looking at ways to get rid of the stigma. And that's a big piece, is knowing what those resources are, having them at your fingertips. There's nothing that drives me crazier than when I see on some social media post or somebody talking that says, hey, if you need help, just reach out to me. There's some people that can say that. Like if Ellen says that, I know she knows who to, she can get help. But there's some people, like, you better be ready for that call. Because if you say those things and somebody calls and reaches out to you, you better know where to send them. So know your resources, and we'll talk a lot about that as we go. But it irritates me to no end if the number and the resources are being hid behind some gate that needs to be unlocked by somebody that now they don't trust that person, or they don't know, or what are they going to say? That stuff should be out there, posted. Everybody should look at it. I've literally had guys text me and call me for information on it because they were scared to look at the boards at the stations, because they didn't want people seeing them look at the board and copy the number down. So we have every station's got all our resources on the board, and we've actually got a website too for that kind of stuff. And that's how they're so worried about that, about what people think. So those resources need to be available and published, and everybody needs to know what they are. So, all right, let's keep moving on here.
Absolutely. We had one comment that I just want to quickly get your thoughts on this. So we had a comment saying that there was a recent situation in one of the townships that had a first responder who needed some resources. And so it didn't seem like the department necessarily was supportive or knew kind of where to help the first responder to go to. So Sean, what are your thoughts about how departments and stations can be more
Yeah, I did see
supportive
that back
to their
there, and
members?
I appreciate. Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that back up. I'm sorry about that. I don't want to speak too much on a specific situation because I don't know all the facts. But I would just say this:
Yes, we don't know the
now,
specifics, so we won't speak on the situation.
right? But in general, during this time in history, we need people that do all of our jobs. So I don't understand why any department would not do anything they can to assist and help a member get through a tough time. And if it's not to do the right thing, which is to take care of your people, do it for the money thing of, hey, we need people. Recruitment retention is impossible right now. So let's try to retain people that we can. I don't know everything, like I said, about that particular situation in general, but I would say that any department needs to look deep. And actually, we're going to talk about this and what can we do, but they need to look deep in the dollars and cents of it. And I use dollars and cents as actually like SENSE as well, because it makes sense to take care of your people and get them the help they need so they can be the best employee possible. And so if you're not doing it to take care of your people, do it to, make sure you've got people on the streets. But that's kind of the gist of it, or the 10,000 feet version. But they definitely need to have programs in there to take care of them. But our next section is what can we do to about stigma? And the number one thing that we can do, all of us, and it's here tonight we're doing it, is normalizing mental health. And I love what the comment about calling it health. It really is. I mean, when we're talking about mental health here tonight, obviously, but it is normalizing mental health as part of our health, and then talking openly about mental health, and not at the kitchen table at my department now. People talk about it. People will be at the kitchen table and be like, hey, yeah, I went and saw Sarah yesterday. I have some issues with my oldest daughter, and it was really good. And they'll talk about those things. One thing that's interesting is generationally, millennials will talk about mental health openly. 62% of them will do that. Baby boomers will only 32% of them will talk openly about mental health. So you can see the shift and the paradigm there as far as the basically 3 generations from baby boomers through Gen X into millennials. I'm a Gen Xer, and I'd say we're probably in between there. But the good news is that 62% for millennials, that is a shift in the stigma, that is a shift in the norm, which is great. But normalize that mental health and talk openly about it. Ellen, how about educating yourself and others?
Absolutely. Being, having an understanding of one, what mental health is, what that looks like, what that means, and then again, educating on resources, but also educating those around us, right? If we hear somebody say something that maybe isn't helpful, or even if we're joking, first responders love the humor, no matter how dark it is, which all good things in moderation, right? But if we're saying something off the cuff and maybe not being as intentional with our words, and you overhear that, take that opportunity to say, hey, actually, that probably wasn't the best thing to say there, or hey, maybe we can say that a little bit differently. Or maybe nobody says anything inherently wrong, but maybe there was a rough call and you take that as an opportunity to step up, whether you're in formal command in your department or not. Step up and check in on each other, to say, hey, that sucked. How's everybody doing? Normalizing checking in on one another and acknowledging when something sucks. I'm not saying that it was earth-shattering to you. You're not sleeping, you're taking it home with you necessarily. But normalize checking in with one another, even if it wasn't something that necessarily stuck with you, and make that just a normal part of your culture. When we talk about the generational changes, that starts with each of you. It takes time to change a culture. And we're seeing those tides change, and just in terms of the percentage of first responders reaching out now versus 20 years ago. But we need to see those numbers continue in that trajectory, and you all are a part of that. And so checking in on one another. If somebody acknowledges that they're struggling, say, hey, that's okay. Maybe even that's an opportunity for you to say, hey, I remember my first homicide scene, or I remember my first death, or whatever the situation is, or I've had those calls too. Normalize that what you all see is not normal. It is not normal what you all see and deal with. We're gonna expect an element of impact. That doesn't mean that you are incapable of your jobs. That does not mean that you are not functioning in the day-to-day. It's just, y'all know those calls that stick with you, and maybe not on a daily basis, but you can recall at the drop of a hat and all the details. Be willing to share your experience as a way to help one another out. Or if you're not comfortable to share the specifics, that's okay too. Lend a listening ear. Think about what would have been helpful to you in that moment, and try not to brush it under the rug out of our own discomfort. I know that sometimes that can be the easiest thing. Sometimes it's not out of us trying to be harsh or unkind. It's out of, I don't know what to say or what to do, and I'm real uncomfortable, because you're starting to use feeling words, and most first responders aren't good with feeling words, and that's okay. Sometimes it's just listen, just hold the space to say, yeah, that was tough. I might not have the answers, but I can listen. Or I can know the resource. I can know where to go if you feel like you do need some answers and some support.
Ellen hit on it with language matters. So when you're addressing stigma around the firehouse and around the stations and wherever you're working at, language does matter. So when you're saying stuff, if you're dismissing mental health, if oh, that's toughen up buttercup, we don't need that, or oh, that stuff's overrated, we don't need those words matter, especially if you're in leadership roles. Those words matter a lot. So we have to make sure that we're building strong mental health resources and behavioral health resources, and not knocking them down. We're promoting those things. And we'll talk about that as we go down with resources, but language matters. One thing, and Ellen kind of hit on as well, I was at a station one time, and we had a person on that crew that was on some medications for some mental health issues that I knew about as an officer. And he came in that morning and said, hey, I forgot to take my meds. And okay. And I'm like, okay. And so halfway through the morning goes on, we're sitting around at the table, or we're all doing some stuff. And one of the guys, and I could tell he was off. And one of the guys on the crew is like, what's wrong with you today? You forget to take your meds or something? And I was like, first he looked at me because he thought that I said something to somebody. So that my trust was like, oh man. And then secondly, looked at that person like, how did you find out? Or what did you? And so when you say things like that, just remember, language does matter when you're saying those things. Oh, man, you're crazy. That's just ridiculous. Language does matter. And the higher up you go, the more the language hits. But we need to make sure we support those things. And I'm not saying that we can't, around our jobs, we use humor a lot to kind of get through some things. But just understand that when you're saying some of these things, we had some people at our house, and Ellen was there actually, and we were all joking around, and my wife was kicking my butt at a game. And so I said something like, don't make me beat you down in front of all these people, or something like that. Well, everyone laughed except for one person. And then they left shortly after. And then I found out later that they grew up in a household that had domestic abuse. And so that wasn't funny to them. And I was like, oh my gosh, I felt horrible. But again, just remember, language does matter when you're saying things and doing things. So around the house. And now I'm going to kind of go right in this next month, kick this off, and Ellen, I'll let you take the next couple. But physical health and mental health are symbiotic. They go together. You can't have one without the other. And I think that's critical. And I think it's a lost piece. And even stuff like sleep and exercise and things like that, those are physical health things, but they help you mentally. So even things like that are there that you need to take care of. So if having, and I want to hit on mental health as well. It's everything. It's not just getting critical incident stress debriefings after a bad call. It's not just getting a good night's sleep. It's everything. It'd be like the same thing of saying, I want to get in shape, so I'm just going to cut out carbs. No, that's not the way to get in shape. You got to work out, you got to eat right. There's so many other things to a good physical health. It's the same thing with mental health. And, it's as easy as reading, getting good rest, staying stimulated, exercising, even stuff like traveling helps your mental health. So there's so many things that are kind of in that whole piece of mental health that are there, but they go together. And I think we need to make sure that they're always linked together, and they're just as important, because without one, you don't have the other. What about compassion for people, Ellen?
In terms of maintaining our compassion for others, or when that compassion fatigue sets in?
Mainly just compassion for people that are seeking support.
So I would say, one, we've all had areas of struggle. We aren't going to be able to relate based on situations always, and how we feel about situations, how we react to situations is different. We can never say that we fully understand or know how somebody else is feeling or responding to a situation, but we're all human. We all know how we've experienced grief. We all know how we've experienced loss or hurt or anger or sadness or disappointment, frustration at the world. Those things have looked different for all of us, and different examples come to mind for each of us, but try to relate from a human aspect. We might not understand somebody's circumstance and remember, we never have the full picture. Goodness, when I meet with individuals and I get to sit down and hear somebody's whole life story, and I love it. And it's no small talk. It's great. It's wonderful. I still don't have all the pieces. I think trying to maintain that empathy of, we see a fraction of somebody's story. And also, that's a gift. It's a gift for individuals to let us into that piece of themselves. And so if we see that area of struggle, that's a really vulnerable place for that person to be. So trying to hold that empathy of, that's really hard. And most of us can think of a time where, whether by our own choice or not, we felt vulnerable or uncomfortable. And how did we want to be treated in that circumstance? What did we want to be met with? And so trying to remember that you definitely don't have all the pieces to the puzzle. Try to hold some empathy for what we don't know, and some grace for that. And try to relate from a human aspect. We might not be in the same situation or the same circumstance, but I know what I feel when I felt loss or hurt, or just the unfairness of the world, and that weight feeling like too much. And that's a feeling that I can relate to, and can know, I don't need to know anything else to hold kindness and grace for this person.
Right. I always say that we all talk in this job space, in public safety here. We talk about being brothers and sisters and family. Well, act like it. If my brother or sister, I have a brother, and my brother is the world to me. I love him to death. If he needed help and support, I would do whatever I can to help him and take care of him. Well, why wouldn't I do the same thing for our own people? I found out today, one of the guys on my crew at a different station, but on my shift, and his dad, one of our crews took his dad to a hospital this afternoon with a heart attack. I mean, I instantly, I'm wondering how he is. I'm empathetic for I feel bad for him. It's just those things, and that's called caring to the human piece. We need to keep moving along because we got a lot of stuff to get to, and we only got 11 minutes left. So empowerment rather than shame. I think it's important, if you do seek help or you have help given to you, that you're empowered by it. And I think a good example of this is like in Alcoholics Anonymous. They have their little coins, 1 month sober, 2 months sober, 3 months, and they're proud of those. They're like, hey, I'm 1 month sober, and they should be, because that's a big deal. And you should be empowered by whatever help you're receiving, rather than having shame or feeling shame. You shouldn't feel shameful that you have a 3 month sober coin. You should be proud of that. And it goes for anything. If you're battling depression and you're seeking help, be empowered by that, hey, I'm strong enough to get help, and I'm working my way out of this. And you shouldn't feel shame for that. You should be empowered by it. And the people that don't support you, screw them. Sorry, they obviously don't care about you. So you should have the people that really truly care will rise to the surface, and they're the ones that'll hold you up and help empower you and make give you the best version of yourself, which is what we want. So we need to get to resources. So I'm going to kick through this really quickly, and then we're going to get through. Ellen's going to kind of finish up with some other things. But we talked about resources. The big one to battle stigma is know what you have, know what resources are out there. This is a huge one right here. The website, the phone number, everyone in the state has access to that. We couldn't say that a year ago. We couldn't say that every first responder in the state has some type of resource. Now you do. We all have at least something. And then find out what your department has, what your employer has. Find out what your health insurance covers, things like that. But here's the thing, and Ellen hit on this earlier. I'm not going to go find a cardiologist or a medical doctor when I'm having a heart attack in my house. That should be the first time I go find a doctor. I should find a doctor ahead of that. So you should be finding these resources out, even if you're like, I don't need help. Someone does, and you'll be able to know what those resources are. So find out what those are, try them out, use them, use what you have. Set a baseline. I go see a counselor at least quarterly, maybe every 6 months. Sometimes things are fine and other times things aren't, but it's good to just go there and talk and kind of see what's up. And then that gives you a good baseline too, that, she can be like, hey, Sean, you're not acting quite, what's going on? Oh, you know what? She knows me. Whereas if it was my first time, the first time you're in crisis shouldn't be, it can be, and a lot of times it is, the first time you're seeing a clinician, because like Ellen said, it might not be that right fit. So use what you have, find out what those resources are, use what you have, and then also support what you have. Support those things to your department, your coworkers, your family members. A lot of our resources are available for family members as well, including this. So make sure our family members understand that. And then recommend what you have. And the only way you can recommend something is if you try it. I'm not going to recommend things. One of the main reasons I use Backing the Badge so much, one's for me because I want to use it. But the other one is I'm not going to recommend a clinician or a service that I don't have trust in or I don't know about. That'd be like recommending going to Disney World and you've never been there. I heard it's great, go, I guess it might be fine. Or, hey, I've been there before. This is great. You have a great time. Your family will love it. So just, try those things out. And here's the big one. And Ellen hit on this. If you don't like what you have, find something else. There's stuff out there, all kinds of things that are out there. Nothing's a perfect fit. So find what works, because here's where stigma gets, and this is that fourth type of stigma, worried about what's going to happen there, is if you have a stigma associated with a program, or you got people coming back talking garbage about your program, what's that going to do to the program? No one's going to use it. And that's worse than having a bad program, is if no one uses it at all. So if you don't like it or people don't like it, find something else. That's what we did in our department. We didn't like what we have. Now we've got something different. Our clinicians do ride-alongs. They come in, they talk with us, they do trainings, and we'll talk about that in this next section, this last 5 minutes. So employees are getting better. I would say yes. And that the reason why is they need you. And like I said earlier, it's about dollars and cents. Recruitment retention is very difficult, and it makes dollars and cents to keep employees. So they're willing to invest in their employees more than they were in the past. And I think mental health is becoming more at the forefront. And it is like one of the I can't remember who typed it in. It is becoming just overall health. And I think that's kind of where we're at. I'll let you talk about this EAP usage, Ellen. The thing I said, it's 3 to 5%, according to Center for Workplace Mental Health, of EAP usage. It's 3 to 5%. That's very low, considering we talked about 20% of people are having some type of mental illness.
Yeah, so with that, I would say, again, you have to know what you have and know how to reach out. And if it's not the right fit, working on to find the right fit, whether that is a clinician change or the program doesn't suit for your department's needs. Like the example I used earlier, there's that department, they were like, why is this place our EAP? This is where we're taking people at 1 a.m. I'm not coming back here at 1 p.m. for my own appointment. So things like that. Are there system pieces that are getting in the way? I had a first responder reach out to me because they had a critical incident and their EAP said, we'll get back to you on Monday. Well, you all know that's not an acceptable answer, right? That's not how the first responder world works. It's not convenient. I think most of you would probably agree it's probably the most inconvenient time, right? I had a rolling joke with a local county that I work with a lot that I was there the 4th of July weekend. I think I might have started with Labor Day weekend, 4th of July weekend, and then like the day before Thanksgiving or something like that. And I was like, I guess I'll see y'all at Christmas because like you guys just want, keeps hitting the fan on the holidays, right? Like it's not convenient time. So making sure that you have resources that are understanding of that and equipped to meet the needs of first responders, which is 24/7, 365. So just being mindful of that.
Yeah, tailoring that program is very, very important to tailor it to what your needs are of your department. A normal EAP is not going to be able to do those things. So figure out what that looks like. And thank goodness we've got Manisha and her team, and because they're all about our schedule, and they know that we need help 365. The employer needs to show the commitment to their employees. That's kind of key. The employer needs to provide services, provide support, and nowadays there's no excuse not to. As a matter of fact, if you have one line of duty disability due to a mental health issue, that could probably pay for a very robust mental health support program for 50 years. So again, back to the dollars and cents of it. We need to make sure we're training our leaders so that they support that and they know what to look for and they can help things out. That's going to help that stigma piece. And also including your normal training. Ellen and I teach our class. We just taught it, 2 or 3 weeks ago to a firefighter 1 and 2 academy. We included family members in that. That's happening around the state. I think in our firefighter 1 and 2 classes, we're including mental health type training as part of the onboarding for firefighter 1 and 2. That's critical. In our own department, they get sworn in one night during their first 2 weeks of their 2-week orientation. And they come in later that day. And at 5 o'clock at night, from 5 to 7, we do a 2-hour mental health support program for them and their families. Their families are included because their families are going to come watch them be sworn in. And then we give them all of our resources, show them what's available to not only the first responder, the firefighter, but also their family, and then how to get help. Because who is going to be the first person to notice a person is in crisis or a person needs help? Their family members. And if they've got those resources already in hand, they can say, hey, Sean, remember I was at that class and you guys have this back in the badge program. You've been acting really irritable lately. Maybe you should give them a call. You know what? You're right. I probably should. So include those things in normal trainings, because I think that's important. And then include family members as well. The class that Ellen and I teach, we do it like on a Friday night generally, and the department comes in, and it's the whole family. It's the firefighters, their family members, things like that. But at the end of the day, it's up to all of us in this room to help normalize, and I like the word, all of our health, both physical and mental. Normalize the fact that taking care of ourselves is a holistic approach to both mental and physical, and one can't survive without the other. And to conclude, before I turn it back over to Manisha and Ellen, I like, there's a lot of stigma associated websites out there and resources. Take a look at them if you're looking for more help. One I really like, it's called makeitokay.org. And they talk about this. They say, don't say, so when you're talking to someone about mental health, don't say, it could be worse. Say something like, thanks for opening up to me. Don't say something like, hey, just deal with it. Say, hey, is there anything I can do to help? Don't say things like snap out of it. Say, I'm sorry to hear that. It must be tough. Don't say things like, everyone feels that way sometimes. Say, I'm here for you when you need me. Don't say things like, you may have brought this on yourself. Say, I can't imagine what you're going through. Lastly, don't say, we've all been there. Say something like, hey, people do get better. And I guess there's one more here. You've got to pull yourself together. Instead, say something like, can I drive you to an appointment and get you some help? And I always say, if you see or hear something's wrong, do something right. And what I mean by that is all of us see other people in our work lives and our personal lives. And you might notice someone's a little off. That 1 ounce of compassion or that one person reaching out might be the difference that they need to help get them some help, to help make them live a better life and be a happier version of themselves or a better version of themselves. And so just, take care of each other. Ellen?
Oh, I think that's a great note to end on. And just I appreciate everybody's time and allowing us to come in and being people that are contributing towards being advocates, not just ending stigma, but being advocates for overall health and wellness for each other and looking out for each other.
Absolutely. Sean and Ellen, thank you so much for being here today. I've got one quick comment that I just wanted to have you guys respond to. It says, historically, the biologic nature of mental health symptoms was poorly known and understood, and things appeared mysterious and untreatable. Exploring mental health symptoms and responses require often intrusive questioning that can seem irrelevant, but it's very important. So I think that's more about the internal work, the personal work that you would have to do.
That's an Ellen question all day.
Yeah.
Yeah, more the internal work, but also I think that I think the word intrusive is a good one. Sometimes I work with. Sometimes people come in and they're just excited that they have somebody to listen and they just want to talk, and other times they're like, you're gonna have to get me to talk, right? And sometimes it can feel intrusive, or I feel like, man, I'm just really crying, and you're like, wow, that's the only way you're gonna get something out of me, because I'm not gonna offer it up, which I would say tends to be the first responder mode, at least until there's a relationship there. And so that can feel intrusive at first. Right, especially if we don't know what to expect, but absolutely it is important, and it's the way that we increase our self-awareness of what's going on, and highlight what are we really good at, and what are some things that maybe our body has developed, especially as first responders, as a way to protect ourselves, that maybe have served us well in some settings and not so well in others. You got to be in control of your scenes. You got to be in control on the job. We got to watch the emotional responses on the job. Those are protective factors that probably don't work quite as well at home, right? That's a really good example of that, something that we see. And so, just being aware of that. And sometimes it can feel intrusive. And that's why I would encourage you to kind of voice what you need with your clinician. There are times where I have to check in with my clients like, hey, is this what you want? Do you want me to dig to ask these questions? Or do you want me to, do we want to do shorter sessions where I don't probe quite as much? It's okay to ask and have some of that autonomy. I might give my clinical opinion, and your clinician is going to give their clinical opinion and guidance. I'd encourage you to trust that. But it's also okay to ask for what you need, or if it's feeling too intrusive, too quick, to share what you're looking for. What's your goal for counseling? What's your goal for reaching out? Because our job is to come alongside you in that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you guys again so much. Before we sign off, do you guys want to let people know how they can get access to your class? The class that you guys teach, is that just for fire? Is it offered to other first responders?
Yeah, it's offered to any first responders. It's probably primarily done fire departments, just because that's kind of my world. It is a Q course for the state. It's called Growing Up in the Fire Service. You can find it online. It's on smoke for a Q course, and it's a 3-hour course. Elle and I teach it together, and it's a very unique perspective on my life as a firefighter and her life as a daughter of a firefighter, and what that meant for our family. And every class, it's a family class. So we obviously, Ellen counsels couples and families and things like that. So she brings that unique perspective in, but then she also brings the perspective of, having Christmases without dad around, and having concerts and sporting events without dad around, and what that meant to her, and the things she took out of it, and other things that, you know, I might have been gone in one instance, but I was there for something else, and the impact that had on her and growing up. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting course. Yeah, we always get rave reviews from the course from people. People really seem to like it. And one of the biggest things people like about it is that we include families. And I think that's a big piece. And I would say for all of us still on the line here, the communication piece and with our families is probably the number one thing that Ellen and I talk about. And kind of when we get to the root of a lot of problems is just good communications. So, and we talk about that in the class. But yeah, we'd be happy to come out to your departments. It's a great evening, and it's all interactive. It's not just Ellen and I standing up in front. There's some small group stuff. We use note cards for people to kind of give answers, so people can remain anonymous, but we can still have some good conversations. And yeah, it's usually a really good course. So thanks, Manisha.
No problem. We will post the information and the links to the courses on our social media page, in addition to our website. Thank you guys all for being here with us this evening. Again, you can find access to first responder resources, again, first responder and the family's resources at fst5.org, or you could call our call line at 1-833-34-STRONG. That is 1-833-347-8766. Thank you again, everyone, and have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.